We're in resumption. Minister, thank you. Acting CDF Secretary, and I'll go to you, Senator Gallacher.
Thank you, Chair. Now, I just want to go to, firstly, a letter of transmittal that's been signed by the Secretary of the Department on the 9th of October 2015 and the Air Chief Marshal, Chief of Defence, 9th of October 2015, and it relates to the consistent with Section 10 of the Public Governance, Performance and Accountability Rule 2014, we certify that we are satisfied that Defence has prepared fraud risk assessments, fraud control plans and has in place appropriate fraud prevention, detection, investigation, recording and reporting mechanisms that meet the specific needs of the Department, and that Defence has taken all reasonable measures to appropriately deal with fraud relating to the Department. And just by way of setting the scene, Mr Richardson, on the 2nd of June 2015, you stated in Hansard, as you know, we deal in really big numbers. I think you are right to go to the fuel card and you're right to highlight that. Credit card is another issue again. Just to give you some information which I think is worth sharing, as of the 6th of May 2015, there were 76,881 corporate credit cards on issue to Defence personnel. The fraud loss for the corporate credit cards in 2013-14 was $96,429, which represents 0.02% of the total credit card expenditure. So I just asked the Minister and or the Secretary, have you any comments to make about the Australian National Audit Office audit of Defence's management of credit and other transaction cards, because it appears to directly contradict both your letter to the Minister and your statement in Hansard?
Senator, thank you. I will make some comments. First of all, that audit report did highlight some shortcomings. We worked cooperatively with the ANAO through the course of that audit, and indeed we made some changes to certain processes while the audit was taking place. The other comment I would make is that in relation to some of the particulars that were highlighted in subsequent media reporting, during the course of the audit we checked it very carefully in respect of use of taxis and other use of credit cards. Take the taxis, for instance. Where taxi fares consisted of some hundreds of dollars, they were cases relating to either one, people returning from deployments from Afghanistan or Iraq and being given permission to take a taxi to their home immediately after returning from deployment, or in some cases they were transport to medical appointments in relation to certain specialist medical services that weren't immediately available in the vicinity of where the serviceman or woman lived. In relation to fuel cards, where fuel cards were utilised entailing amounts beyond the capacity of a single vehicle to hold. In all cases, that was a pragmatic and sensible use of a card where you had multiple ADF vehicles filling up with fuel one after the other, and rather than use multiple fuel cards, the one fuel card was used for the total bill. Finally, I make two other observations. One, the ANAO certainly made some very good recommendations in relation to process, some of which we took on board during the course of the audit itself. Final comment is that I'm not aware of the ANAO picking up instances of fraud. So problems of process, yes. Fraud, no. And we've looked at all of those instances very carefully, and we're satisfied that in each case the expenditure was for a proper purpose.
So, Mr. Richardson, you're satisfied that the withdrawal of $99,900 in cash and the cash advances, which I'll read out. Cash withdrawals on a travel card in 2014-15 totalled $50 million, with a 1.75% value to the withdrawal. $888,328 was charged to the taxpayer. So you're happy with that?
I will take. I'm not aware of any of that constituting improper conduct or fraud.
Okay.
But Angela, whether you wish to.
Well, let's put one specific to you. How was it that a cardholder withdrew $1,147 to pay suppliers over a total of 10 days at a cost of $18,278?
Well, one, I would need to know the precise details of that. Where we have checked, it has been for proper purposes.
Can
for
you
instance,
explain the case where a succession of cash withdrawals totalling $879,000, including 3 withdrawals of $99,000, they're in the audit report.
Yeah, that's right.
You haven't seen those?
Senator, I don't carry in my head the details of every single item in the audit report. Very happy to take that on notice. But, for instance, I'll give you an example. In terms of, we have credit card limits of up to $800,000 now. It was up to $2 million. Why do we have that? Because when ships go abroad and they need to be replenished, it's a bit different to staying in a hotel overnight. It costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to replenish ships when they go abroad, and it's for that, and it's for particular reasons like that there are individuals in defence with very high limits on their credit card, and they are audited, and in all cases we have ascertained they have been used correctly for proper purposes.
Look, I take your point that you need to spend lots of money revitulling a ship. I'm not sure that you need to do it with a credit card, that's all. But can I just go to some very quick questions?
Yes, you do it with a credit card. We don't give people travelling abroad, for instance, with a ship, millions of dollars in cash.
No, I'm talking about leaving the port of Darwin. Why can't you just get an account like everybody else?
If they're overseas.
Fine, I've heard your answer. I haven't got a lot of time. So what I would like to ask is, in amongst the fast cards that were cancelled and had been left in circulation apparently erroneously, why does the Minister, the Assistant Minister and the Parliamentary Secretary need a defence-issued fast card?
I'm not aware who has what. But
Once again, that's a matter of the audit report. It's not my supposition. That's public document audit report.
Yeah, that's right. And it's X number of pages, and I do not carry in my head every single detail relating to it. I'm answering the questions the best I can, and someone else here can answer. Please.
David Spouse, Senator, First Assistant Secretary, Financial Services. So in terms of fast cards, on request, the Minister and the Minister assisting and the Parliamentary Secretary previously, this is pre-election, retained fast cards for cab charge. The authority for that was the Secretary, as the accountable authority, signed the accountable authority instruction, which gives those officers on request cab charge cards, or fast cards as they're now called.
So can I just ask the Minister, in addition to Comcar and your own Commonwealth card, why would you need a defence card?
I have a cab charge card, Senator. I don't have anything else.
Well, it says in this audit report,
So I don't
on the
think it
9th of
applies.
July 2015, in the course of the audit, Defence cancelled
I'm sorry,
31
what
of
was the date,
34
Senator?
fast cards,
Senator,
but
what was
left
the date?
active
It's 2015 when you weren't the minister.
Correct.
on 9th of July 2015.
Correct, when I was not the minister.
But
I'm
left
indicating to you,
active
Senator,
each of
I
those
have
that
a
had been
cab charge
provided
card.
to the Minister of Defence, Assistant Minister of Defence and the Pale Secretary for Defence.
Senator, I have a cab charge card that does not relate to my role. I was not the minister on
Perhaps
that
you could
date.
take on notice why the previous minister needed an additional fast card and his Pale Sec and his assistant. Just seems incongruous. I mean, you've already got Tom currently fast
We
card.
we can take that on notice. It will have been for a proper purpose.
Yes. So, Mr Richardson, you've given the assurance both to the Senate committee that credit cards were appropriately controlled. I presume yourself and the Chief of Defence have been satisfied again to write to the Minister, but this audit report says in quite clear and concise terms, Defence does not have a complete and effective set of controls to manage the use of credit and other transaction cards. That's one of the findings of the Audit Office.
Yes, and we took steps during the course of that audit to address some of the deficiencies, and I stand by the advice we have previously given, and I would note that the ANAO report did not find instances of fraud.
It says, and very importantly, key preventative controls have either been inconsistently applied or not implemented at all. Key detective controls, such as review of transactions, have been implemented in a manner that limits their effectiveness. I mean, these are fairly straightforward statements.
We rectified that during the course of
But
the
you didn't
audit.
have it in place when you gave this Parliament or this committee the assurance that everything was going well.
Well, I would simply note that there are no instances of fraud. I would simply note that there was the proper use of taxpayers' money, and I would simply note that in terms of some of the headlines that people make out of these transactions, in each case they were for a proper purpose, and when you explain them, people understand it.
The report also found members were able to request cash access from Defence Corporate Credit Card Support Centres with no approval from the group CFOs, Treasury and Banking, and no delegate approval from the Acting First Assistant Secretary, Resource and Assurance Division. How is that possible that that happens under your watch and the Minister's watch? And presumably the Chief of Defence is busy running operational matters, not looking down the line at credit card transactions.
I would note that that we spend $32.4 billion of taxpayers' money. I would note that in that audit report, it did not find instances of fraud. I would note that the instances of fraud in Defence are very, very small, which means the money has been spent properly for a proper purpose. Yes, inadequacies in processing, which you rightly point out, and which the ANAO report rightly address, and as I've said previously, we worked very closely with the ANAO during the course of that audit, and we made corrections to our processes as we went along, and we have subsequently made corrections to them. But there were not instances of fraud. In other words, the taxpayers' money was properly spent for a proper purpose.
And the audit report says Defence's card management system processes are not well suited to acquitting cash taken in advance. Cash advances are processed through CMS in the same manner as any other credit card expenditure. They're not identified as advances that need to be acquitted at a later stage through presentation of receipts. and Defence relies on the cardholder and the independent reviewer of their transactions, the CMS supervisor, to ensure cash advances are appropriately acquitted. All of these statements by the Audit Office seem to indicate a lack of probity and process to guarantee that the ordinary person going about their duties in defence are protected by acquitting properly the expenditure they incur.
Not a lack of probity, I would agree, a lack of process. I really have nothing more to add than what I've already said.
But to put this in context, if you don't have proper processes to deal with cash advances and you are allowing cash advances in excess of $50 million, then you can drive a bus through your assurances to the Parliament and the Minister about that you've got proper fraud control in place.
I don't think you can make that assertion. I can only repeat that, one, the ANAO did not find instances of fraud. I would have thought that was significant. Secondly, you are aware of the instances of fraud in defence, which in the context of the budget, $1 of fraud is not acceptable, but I would note the instances of fraud in defence are small. I've already acknowledged that there were shortcomings in the processes. I've already acknowledged that we work closely with the ANAO in addressing them. So I can't add any more to what I've already said.
Okay, so just to finish up, $548 million thereabouts of transaction cards, fuel, fast cards, credit cards. The audit statement has identified a period where you gave assurances both to the Minister and this Parliament that you had proper processes in place. Do you accept that the audit report highlights that there weren't proper processes in place at the time you gave that assurance to both the Minister and the Parliament?
Two things. One, it doesn't highlight fraud. That is a key thing. Taxpayers' money was not misspent. Taxpayers' money was used for a proper purpose. I would have thought that's pretty important when you come to dealing with public monies. Shortcomings in processes I have acknowledged about 5 or 6 times during the course of this discussion. I can do no more than acknowledge it again and point out what we did during the course of the audit.
Well, an ordinary person could draw the conclusion that the absence of detective controls, proper authorisation procedures, and the fact that you issued 100,000 cards, which 20% were never even activated, meant that you didn't have the taxpayers' interest at heart. You didn't have the proper processes into place to give the assurance, or dare I say it, identify fraud when it came up.
It's a
question. He didn't have those things.
What it highlights, Senator, is that of the 58,000 people who are in the ADF, the 22,000 people who are reservists, and the 18,000 public servants in defence, they are highly responsible, highly conscious of the fact that they're dealing with taxpayers' money, and overwhelmingly are proper in their dealings with money. I would have thought, yes, shortcomings in processes, as you properly point out, but an absence of fraud. I'm proud of that.
And I would pay respect to those many thousands of defence personnel and public servants, and I'm assured by you that they're doing the right thing, and I actually believe that. But no one can prove it. If you've got a system you can drive a bus through in terms of detective controls, you haven't used analytics, you've got dockets which say City to Pinkenbar, which is 14.8 kilometres, and a docket which says it was $580 worth of cab fare. Those examples are on your watch. You've given the assurance and you've failed to put in place proper processes.
Senator, you just made a couple of comments there that are just flat wrong. First of all, the ANAO would have found instances of fraud if they were there. Secondly, we checked. So when you give the example of someone going by taxi from A to B at a cost of over $500, we actually went and we identified the individual. We identified the taxi ride and we identified the purpose. And as I said to you, in all but 3 cases, they were related to either one, ADF personnel returning from deployments in Iraq, Afghanistan, and we properly gave them permission to travel by taxi from the airport to their home. In some cases, that was from Sydney Airport to the Blue Mountains, Sydney Airport to Wollongong. In one case, Sydney to Newcastle because of the absence of other transport at that particular time when they were arriving. In some cases, it was in relation to providing an ADF member with a taxi to go from where they live to visit a specialist doctor which was not available in the town and in the centre where they lived. We tracked all of them down. So
City to Pinkenba, how did you? What was that about?
We can answer them.
Okay,
we
so it's
tracked them all down.
City to Pinkenba, $585.
Sorry, Angela Diamond, Acting CFO. We've actually looked into each transaction, and that is actually incorrect, saying that it's from City to that particular location. It was actually from the Brisbane Airport in that particular instance.
Brisbane Airport to Pinkenba?
To the Highfields, which is near Toowoomba.
Okay,
So there are some inaccuracies in terms of the locations, but that is, we've investigated, and they are the true locations that we found.
But the audit office found that your examination identified 2% of transactions. Their examination found 14% of transactions were, not in conformity with expected sort of patterns of expenditure.
Sorry, the 14%.
Have you read the audit report?
Yes, I have.
Are you aware that the audit officers found a significantly higher volume of transactions which they deemed to be needing questions than you did?
So we've actually gone through each of those transactions as the Secretary outlined, and we are satisfied that those transactions are accurate and there is no fraud attached to those.
All right, I'll rest on this question. Yep. You have a statement of low risk, low value transactions, less than $10,000. That's your policy for credit cards.
That's right.
Why do you have 900 at 100,000?
For operational requirements. So as the
So I'm
Secretary
talking about
outlined,
low risk, low value transactions under 10,000, but you have 900 cards at 100,000, and
Yep,
I know
that's right.
I'm team at 250,000, and you've got one that you fill a ship
So
with.
one thing we need to, I suppose, distinguish here is the transaction as to opposed to the card limit. So you can have many transactions that are under 10,000, but you may need a card limit for that particular month to be higher than that, of course. Otherwise, you'd only be able to use it once if the card limit was only $10,000.
So I can...
We make 1,000 transactions at 10,000.
So if I can just outline to you in terms of the purchasing card, there are only purchasing card, there are 99.9 transactions that are less than $10,000. Sorry, 98.5% of the transactions on a DPC is less than $10,000.
Okay. Are you aware the audit report says that transactions appear to have been divided in order to avoid the Oz tender requirements of reporting purchases over $10,000?
There are controls that we've got in place.
Are you aware
to
the
try
audit
and...
report says that?
I have read the report. You
and
are
have
right.
you investigated that?
Yes, absolutely.
Is it true or is it false?
I've not found, and I'm not aware of instances where people have actually specifically split transactions in order to avoid reporting on Oz tender.
But you are aware that the audit report says that has happened?
I am aware that that report says that.
And is that...
But I'm not aware of an instance where that has actually occurred.
Is that because you don't look?
We do look.
Okay.
We do look.
All right,
and we've
Chair,
actually...
I'm happy. Well,
Right.
I have many more questions on this matter, but I don't want to take up too much more time here.
Senator Gallagher, Senator Farrell.